I didn't think I could be forgiven. I was like, y'all don't know what I've done. All you Christians just shush. I don't want to hear y'all. And the Lord was like in church one Sunday, you shush. You don't know what you're talking about. Are you in or are you out? And I gave my heart to Christ. I believed in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of my sins and the power of God in my life to live the new life. Now, I didn't know how that was going to work back then. I polished how I say it now. But when I became a Christian, my history, your history with preaching and teaching starts when you become a Christian. I didn't know the Bible. I didn't barely have a Bible, only a few months maybe, and it was King James. Guys like me, I was Van Halen guy. I didn't know King James. Are you kidding me? And then I heard a guy on the radio. I had no idea who he was. In El Paso, he came on at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. His name's Chuck Smith. And he made the Bible so simple. And I considered Chuck Smith my radio rabbi. Next, I married a Southern Baptist girl, so I heard a lot of Southern Baptist preaching, which is highly evangelistic. Next, I listened to a guy, anybody remember Walter Martin, the original Bible answer man? I listened to that guy. I didn't know any Bible. I didn't have a framework for theological thinking. I had zero. And I listened to that guy dismantle cults, and I thought, I like him. He's great. And then there was a pastor in El Paso named Oni I. Kirk. None of you know Pastor Oni I. Kirk. He's in heaven right now. He was basically popular in El Paso and a few other places within black culture. We went to a black church, man. If you didn't get there on time, you didn't get a seat, and it was fire. Pastor Kirk would run down that aisle with a hanky in his hand, waving it. He almost always ended up with the woman at the well in every sermon, and he would share the gospel. He was 65 years old. We thought he was going to have a heart attack one Sunday. He'd start singing his sermon the way you do in black church. I had never seen such church. I thought, wow, this is awesome. Well, then God, 4 years after I got saved, called me to the ministry in a small black church in Schweinfurt, Germany. There were only 15 people there that night. My wife said, I'll never marry a pastor because her dad is a pastor. And God called me and I moved. I didn't plan on it, but the Holy Spirit moved and I came up. And my wife, you should have seen her face. She couldn't believe it. She was like, what are you doing? I think God's called me to the ministry, girl. She didn't know what to do. My pastor, Elijah Mitchell, who I would say he would hate me saying this, but he had the rhetorical skill of Martin Luther King. When pastor lit it up, oh my gosh, it was artwork, man. Black preaching at its best. He taught me how to preach. He's the one that taught me about an introduction, a body of a message, and a conclusion. I learned to preach. I love saying this. I learned to preach in a local church, not at Southwestern Seminary, not at Gordon Conwell, not at a conference. My pastor taught me how to preach. He gave me my first, well, it's really not my first. I was thinking about it in an earlier session. My first experience preaching was in El Paso, street preaching. But my formal first time in a church house, Pastor Elijah Mitchell gave me an opportunity. Taught me sermon basic prep. Rob Springle taught me missions and preaching. Haddon Robinson, my doctoral professor, I really knew him before I ever knew him because I had started reading his book trying to understand it. I felt like the Ethiopian eunuch. How can I understand unless somebody guides me? And little did I know I'd get to be in a cohort with Haddon Robinson. I was with John. We were in the first cohort together and preached 3 times there. And in the cohorts, only one of them did I get it right. The other 2, just like we got done evaluating each other, I bombed out on both of them. And I thought I was going to get kicked out of the course. I thought, I'm done. And Robinson was like, what are you talking about? We're going to lunch. Let's go. Another one is Lloyd C. Blue. You don't know Blue's name, But you know the pastor he used to work for, Dr. Blue used to work for E.B. Hill. And Dr. Blue taught me evangelistic exposition. Now, why am I telling you my story? Because I want you right now to be thinking about your own story. Somebody has had an effect on you. God has put you in places where he wants you to see the influences that he's put in your pathway. Because if we recognize where God's put us, it ought to motivate us to be in somebody else's pathway.